Again, this comes from my book, Your Journey to Being Yourself. This is the start of chapter 5. And I'm going to read to you a little bit of what is creating the problem. All right. So this is how it starts out. Think about your last relationship, the one that left you stuck to your couch with your coffee table littered with empty beer or wine bottles. Remember how you chastised yourself for ignoring your fears that pointed to the obvious signs that this person would eventually betray you. As you sat there, feeling ashamed, grasping for yet another Kleenex to absorb the streaming tears with self-contempt and scorn, you uttered, "I knew it. I knew they would do this to me." You can no longer deny the obvious. You're completely present to this pattern within yourself, where you ignore the obvious signs and your repeated self-sabotage in neglecting your internal truth. You feel embarrassed and stupid. Yet you also feel a sense of power and hope because you know you always saw through their deception. If only you could listen to yourself next time. Now, if you can't draw on a relationship memory, think of your favorite hobby. Maybe it's golf. Picture yourself on the driving range, golf clubs and empty baskets scattered about. Your fingers are calloused. Your shirt soaked through as the salt of the sweat burns your eyes. You rake another ball and begin your setup. Your anxiety starts to rise as your body creates an image of that one spot in your swing where there's a hitch. You know it's coming, but you're determined to stop it this time. As you take the club back, the fear escalates, the emotions stiffen you, and instead of starting your downswing with your legs, you come over the top with your right arm. It takes command, and you watch helplessly as the ball sails to the right once again. Redirecting your shame, you slam the club down in frustration and mutter, "I'm such an idiot. Why can't I get this?" Taking a seat on the nearby bench, you lean forward, examining your hands as the sweat from your brow drips past them. You're fully aware of your bad habit, the fear of its recurrence, and the self-loathing you'll feel when it happens again. But even though you're certain of these outcomes, you're just as certain you can overcome them. You stand back up, grab your 8-iron, and drag another ball into place. Regardless of the life circumstance, whether it's a relationship, a hobby, a friendship, or a career, have you noticed this pattern is always the same? Step 1, a fear you want to avoid repeats itself. Step 2, once repeated, self-recrimination and shame follows. Step 3, then comes the awareness that both fear and shame will be experienced. 4, the certainty of outcome and the recognition of the part you play creates a sense of power. 5, the combination of the self-inflicted certainty and power sparks hope that you can change the outcome. 6, that hope empowers you to try again. 7, the self-victimizing cycle repeats itself until you own the part you play, do the healing work required, and learn a new way. Welcome to the worst day cycle. Does that resonate? Isn't that everything we do? The same pattern over and over and over. That's because we're stuck reliving the unhealed emotions and trauma from our childhood, and it permeates everything we do. We can't avoid it. The only way you can stop this cycle is to learn emotional authenticity. Now, there's a bit of a problem in being able to do that. part of the way your brain works, it works to sabotage you. And so I'm going to read a little bit from that section. This comes from, I think it's chapter 2 on how the brain and emotions work. So I'm going to read this, how your brain processes, and then we'll get into some solutions and some more stuff. So how exactly does the brain process information? All information coming from the 5 senses is initially filtered through the right hemisphere, which first creates an emotional awareness and reaction. You feel before you ever think. The right side then creates a global picture and understanding based on past experiences, childhood. Then it passes that information over to the left. There it's trimmed down, categorized, and labeled and simplified before it's supposed to be passed back to the right. A final emotional sifting completes the fullest, most complete, and accurate assessment for our best use and highest intellect. The last biological step of reconnecting with the right side, our emotions, is what's missing in our personal and societal constructs. And it happens often. Our tendency to finalize conclusions with left-sided thinking, rooted in analysis and detailed computations, leaves rigid outcomes of self-deception and denial, which lacks the fuller, more inclusive, emotional neutralizer we need to achieve a balanced, more successful conclusion, judgment, or decision. According to Ian McGilchrist, the author of The Master and His Emissary, I'm going to take a break from the manuscript here. He did a neuroscientific analysis of the last 20 years of all neuroscientific research to a macro analysis of all the conclusions of how the brain works. All right. This is a quote from his book. Quote, although the left hemisphere does not see and cannot understand what the right hemisphere understands, it is expert at pretending that it does, at finding quite plausible but bogus explanations for the evidence that does not fit its versions of events. McGilchrist's work reveals that the left side is built to operate as a denial-based, self-rejecting monster and is less reliable than the right in matters of attention, perception, judgment, emotional understanding, and indeed, intelligence, as it is conventionally understood. Even when the left side is exposed to truth and evidence or facts regarding its faulty processing, it will produce reasoning and actions that are even more false, destructive, and completely wrong. But it doesn't stop there. In fact, when the left side is exposed to the truth of its faulty processing, it doubles down and sees the evidence of its falseness as fuel to keep pursuing its destructive line of thinking. To make matters even more dire, since the left is built to deny truth and accountability, placing responsibility for its own wrongdoing on others is its second nature. The left side's goal is to remain steadfast in its need to be right. It may even go as far as flipping the script and casting itself as the victim of the situation, much like a narcissist. As McGilchrist puts it, the left hemisphere is not keen on taking responsibility. If the defect might reflect on the self, it does not like to accept it. But if something or someone can be made to take responsibility, if it's a victim of someone else's wrongdoing, it is prepared to do so. That's at the heart of what we are all stuck in. I'm going to read one more quote from him. The master, which is the right hemisphere, realizes the need for an emissary, the left hemisphere, to do certain work on his behalf, which he, the master, must not involve himself with, and then expects the left side to report back to him. That is why he appoints the emissary in the first place. The emissary, however, knowing less than the master, thinks he knows everything and considers himself the real master, thus failing to carry out his duty to report back. That's at the heart of why we can't control our emotions. We have a society and a science community that keeps pushing intellect, left hemisphere logic. Well, all the neuroscience shows that's not the best way for your brain to work. Your brain, everything we process always comes in emotionally. We have an emotional reaction. You can't control your emotions because we haven't taught emotional authenticity and emotional intelligence. As I said in my live the other day, is like building the outer edges of a puzzle. That's all. All you get is the border. You need emotional authenticity, which gives you the plan and process to build the interior of the puzzle. That's the full, complete picture that both hemispheres need. And that's what my program, my book, and everything I've designed teaches you how to do. It completes the picture. It completes the process between both hemispheres so that you can create not only the best emotional response, but the best intellectual response. Here's what you have to pay attention to. This is how the left hemisphere works. Because almost all information in personal development is that you have to think your way out of a problem. You know what your left hemisphere is going to do right now? It's going to go into denial. Because remember what the left hemisphere does. Even proof of its faulty processing, it'll double down and keep going in its falseness and then flip the script and make itself the victim. So this is what this book is going to show you repeatedly, is how we all do that. How everyone on the planet is stuck in this self-deception denial loop because we lack emotional authenticity, but mostly how to turn it around. So the first thing to recognize in you is, what are you feeling right now as you hear this new information? Because you're going to have an emotional, remember, all information comes into the right side and processes things emotionally based on past experiences. So take a second right now. If you're feeling a little uncertain about this new information, ask yourself a couple of questions. What am I feeling? If you don't know, I have a free feelings wheel on my website. Just go to the resources tab and you can download a free feelings wheel. And this is part of the emotional authenticity process, is you learn to create what's called granularity and specificity to your emotions, because we're so underdeveloped emotionally. Most of us don't really know what we're feeling. So the first step is, okay, scared, unsure, confused, uncertain. All right. Those are possible emotions. Then ask yourself, where in your body do you feel it? Because all emotional reactions are stored in the body. Now ask yourself, what's my first memory of having this thought and feeling? Most people are going to remember a situation somewhere in the last week or two, maybe boss or somebody said you were wrong. Okay, what's the next one before that? And then before that, and then before that. And eventually you're going to arrive at a memory between 2 and 10 years old of your parents standing over you, telling you that you didn't know the right answer. Boom. You're here present with me. You're 25, 35, 55, 65 years old. But in this moment, that feeling proves you are not conscious. You are reliving your childhood. You are detached from your authentic self. That's what this book shows you, is how we all are. And this is how it works. So you're reliving the past because all emotions are not pre-programmed. We're not born with them. They are learned, what are called simulations, concepts, and definitions. You're going to learn all about that in here. And so you're having an emotional reaction based on your childhood. That also, as you laid out all those experiences, there's your worst day cycle. You're just repeating it. Remember the first part of what I read in the book? There it is. You've been doing that same 7-step process over and over and over. It's become a stored in neural pathway. I use this analogy in my first book, Your Journey to Success. Have you ever gone sledding? Just think, if you haven't, think of, it's January or December 31st. It's probably snowing most places. Imagine 3 feet of powder had just fallen and you have this great hill next to your house and you and your friends are going to go sledding. So what do? You walk up that hill. You get to the top, you go sliding down. You do that a few times and all of a sudden the snow has been compressed, right? So now you're in this channel. Well, you can't steer out of that. That's all of us. I just proved it to you. You're repeating from childhood. You're stuck in the worst day cycle loop, repeating this exact same process through. This is what the human species does, okay? Because our brain doesn't know right from wrong. All it cares about is, do I know this experience or not? If it doesn't, it avoids it. If it knows it, even if it's bad, it will repeat it. That's the worst day cycle. That's the emotional chemical addiction we all get stuck in because of our underdeveloped brain, the lack of science and society to teach us that we need to grow emotionally to break out of that. So the only solution is to learn emotional authenticity. So you can, and what emotional authenticity teaches you is, what were the steps I took all the way up that hill? This is my pattern. This is my neural pathway pattern of how I repeat the pain and re-victimize myself by repeating these destructive choices and go down that hill. So you become aware. It's a massive awareness process of how you're caught in this loop. Now, once you're aware of it, then my classes and books and everything I teaches you how to take new steps up the hill. Because think of it, 3 feet of powder, you just step in the old spots, right? Because it's easier. Stepping in a new spot, you got to crush the snow down. It takes work. You got to lift your legs up higher. You're like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to build the middle of the puzzle. Just give me the border. Just give me emotional intelligence where I don't have to do anything. I don't get anywhere, but it's simple and easy. I can just snap it together. So I'll just keep repeating these simple steps and go right down the path I've already driven or I've already sled. Well, we're going to have to do a little bit of lifting. Lift our legs up, create new steps all the way up the hill. And when you get to that top, you're at the top of your golf swing and that right arm wants to come over, or you're sitting there on a date and you see that sign. You see their deception. You see that there's a problem with this person. And with emotional authenticity, taking new steps, now you're at crunch time. Am I going to repeat the pattern and sled down this exact same path I've always chosen? Am I going to come over top? Am I going to agree to a second date? No. I'm done with the pain. I'm done hurting myself. I'm done with the destructive mental and emotional mess. I'm going to take 2 steps to the left. I'm going to carve a new neural pathway, one that works for me and not against me. Now, to do that, it's a massive process. I hate to, when you look at anything online of how to sell programs, they say, make it simple and easy. Make it the outside border of the puzzle, something that people just go, oh, they feel good. Well, you know what? That's why nobody's getting better, because nobody wants to tell people the truth. This is tough work. You got to make a commitment. You got to get up every day and go, no, I'm going to step in. I'm going to lift my leg and create a new step. I'm going to learn this stuff. I'm going to commit. Just like any other habit. Or what is it you love? Do you play tennis? Do you kayak? Do you go hiking? What are you passionate about? You're more than willing to do the work to learn those skills. I'm just advocating you be passionate for yourself. When are you going to start putting that passion into you? Isn't it your turn? Don't you deserve that? I mean, that's just the way I look at it. Aren't we worth putting the effort into us? That's why I always find it fascinating when people talk about personal development. They go, how much does it cost? I'm like, isn't that fascinating? Cost. Reclaiming my authenticity, reclaiming my life is a cost. No one ever says, how much is the investment? How much do I, in other words, how much do I matter? How much is it going to cost me to let go of my destructive loop? God, it's just going to cost me so much to take new steps. That just breaks my heart. Even that phrasing, you're going to learn how those descriptors and metaphors are teaching you, wait a minute, you're perceiving this wrong. It's a paradox. It's not a cost. The cost is if you choose not to learn how to take new steps. Because look at your life. How much does it cost you to not do the work? How many divorces have you had? How many narcissists have you been with? How many abusive people have you been with? How many are working below your potential? How many of you stuck in a job that you absolutely hate and can't stand? 93% of all people on the planet hate their job. That's proof of the worst day cycle. They're pursuing something that's self-victimizing. They're not living in their authentic self. They're stuck in left hemisphere logic. They're not using both sides of their brain the way it's supposed to be used. I find that heartbreaking. So the question that I had, and I was in this place too, because, I started recovery when I was 21, but I didn't get serious until my first divorce when I was 37, 38. And that divorce bankrupted me. And, so I tell the story of, my first counselor, Mike, and, after meeting with him and telling him a bit about my struggles, I just summed it up with, Mike, I don't know how to be a man. I just didn't. She was abusive. There were all these terrible things. But I knew enough to know that was a reflection on me and my lack of development. I just didn't know why and how. And his response to me was, Kenny, when I was in your shoes, I went and became an expert. He was an hour and a half away. I went once a week to see him and once a week to go to the group that was at the facility. The only bill I made damn sure that got paid was his. I lived in an apartment with absolutely no furniture. At the time, I had a construction company. I had 2 sawhorses and a piece of plywood that I put my computer on and a chair to sit in. I slept on the floor with blankets and a pillow. Every cent I had went to my recovery. I made the commitment. I'm done. How much does it cost me not to learn this stuff? Look at where I am. Look at what's going on. And so I'm flabbergasted by people who say, oh, it's just, I don't have the money. Yet they're spending $5, $10 at Starbucks. Like, I don't want to demean people. I'm not going to go down that path. It's just the left hemisphere. Like, I have empathy for them. They don't know that their left hemisphere is stuck in denial and self-deception, they're doubling down on their self-deception and their line of thinking, and then placing themselves as a victim going, oh, I just can't do it. Now, there are a very small percentage of people that, truly can't afford things, but it's just a choice. It's as simple as that. How much does it cost you not to do the work? Now, again, it doesn't have to be with me. Pick somebody that you like. As I always say, pick someone you know, like, and trust. But do the work. Start learning. Start investing in you. You're worth it. God, you're worth it. But I can't have, that's the codependent dynamic we all get stuck in, is we don't do the work because we want somebody's passion like mine to champion it for you. Well, you have to do that for yourself. I can't, there's no magic pill for me to, flip the switch and get you to do it. At some point, you have to choose. I'm done building the outer edges of the puzzle. I'm done taking the same steps up that hill and sliding down that same path. I want a new one. I'm worth it. Well, that's why I started all of this, is to help those people who are done. So I'm going to check the chat here. All right. Jane Smith says, hi, I've been trying hard to deal with every trauma from 5 years old through now, loving others my whole life. My body literally broke. Fibromyalgia, ME, CFS, massive back issues. What that tells me, Jane, is I already know someone with fibromyalgia, when their body gives out, they're nicing people to death. They're cut. I talk about this, the nice paradox, that when you're taught to I talk about this also, it's called the attachment authenticity bind, where as a child, we have to choose between attachment or living in our authentic selves. And because none of us are taught how to parent, we're all stuck in all of, the worst day cycle. All of us let go of our authentic selves, develop a false persona, detach from our authentic self, and become what our parents need so we can get what we want, because we need to survive. Well, a person who's been through the type of health conditions that you're listening, Jane, what that tells me is your false persona was the nice persona. You do what's called giving yourself away. You can't say no. You can't set boundaries. You can't ask for your needs and wants. If you do, you feel guilty, but you're stuffed. Fibromyalgia and those conditions are stuffed anger and rage, because you're swallowing all of your true morals and values, needs and wants, negotiables and non-negotiables. You're living a life completely against yourself, and your body is sending the message to you. It's your turn to start saying no. But again, we have a society that teaches us the wrong way to be nice. It's a very victim-oriented niceness. It doesn't help us. So the proof of the niceness, here's how you can tell you're using nice to manipulate people and re-victimize yourself and make yourself sick and hurt. The good news is, Jane, you're not bad. There's nothing wrong or defective with you. You're just living a process that the world has taught you. And you're not to blame for that. Nobody's developed any of this, so you didn't know. But this is the beauty of the authentic self. It drives us, it uses the worst day cycle to destroy us, to show us the way back. So all of these ways you can't say no and everything, we will do that until we destroy ourselves enough that we finally make the choice to deal with the things we've been avoiding the most, the recovery aspects we've been avoiding. Well, listening to the way you wrote about this tells me that standing up for yourself is the part that you're rejecting and not accepting your authentic self and your authentic power. And here's how you can figure that out. Whenever a request comes in, ask yourself 3 questions. Will I ever keep score that I did this for them? Will I ever throw it in their face after I do it for them? Or will I ever have resentment at how much I do for others and don't get in return? If you think any of those 3 things will happen, you need to say no. Well, I guarantee, person with those health issues, all 3 of them. This was me. What I had to admit was I wanted to be glorified for my goodness. My childhood my father was so domineering that I gave myself away. And I still have pictures of him watching TV and me rubbing his feet. Just like a little, oh gosh, I'm not drawing a character in my head. I see a picture, but don't know the name. Just totally like simping and trying to get him to pay attention to me. And he completely ignored me. That's the niceness. We do all these things, but underneath, we don't want to. And the proof of that is we have all that anger and resentment for how nice we're being and how we're not being recognized. And so before you ever say yes to anyone, you need to satisfy those 3 questions. I go through that whole saying no process in my online classes. There are 2 magic phrases. One starts in the beginning, one's at the end, and learning how to say no and stop processes like this. And those magic phrases work every time. You never have to explain yourself. You never have to defend yourself. It breaks that whole dynamic. Okay. Let's see to sum up for you, Jane, what you're stuck in is the inability to say no. There's a lot of codependence going on here. And until that codependence is dealt with and addressed on a very deep level, these conditions will continue. Don't know where to go from here. I lost my seeing through people and my intuition as I've joined God by 4 different people. And people wind up being, yeah, Jane, everything, I'm seeing this, how do I say this lovingly? Right. And here's how I can tell somebody is still getting a lot out of being the victim. They still tell the story of the victimhood, even as they talk about how much recovery work they've done. And God, this just sounds really demeaning. It's not my intent, Jane. I just teach truth, responsibility, healing, and forgiveness. And so what this tells me is whoever you have sought out for help, whatever the teachers have been or counselors or therapists, they haven't been truthful with you. They haven't shown you how to take responsibility or do the healing work necessary to get through this. It's not deep enough. All they've given you is the outer edges of the puzzle. They probably niced you. I mean, you deserve tremendous empathy. I'm reading your stuff. You've been through a lot. That's good. But a qualified professional not only extends empathy, but they give you skills and tools and confront where we're in deception, where our left hemisphere is playing the victim, where it's doubling down on its falseness. It's telling a hero story and not sending the truth, all the information back to the right side so we can get into truth and see a fuller picture. Well, the way to get out of this, I'm trying to think if there might be another program out there. I don't know all the programs. I know this, my program will break you of that process, of that self-destructive loop that you're in. It goes deep enough. If you're willing to do the work, it will give you the process you need to create new steps and create a new sledding path. If you feel you're ready for that, leave a message. It's my Greatness University, the greatness U, the letter U.com. My online masterclasses will walk you right through that. Both of my books, the compilation of the classes and my books will give you the process that's lacking for you. Okay. Let's see, Crystal, what about hope? Not sure if it's keeping me in an unhealthy relationship or if it's asking me to own my responsibility and where ruptures have occurred while moving more distant from them, or both. Here's why we get hope. All right. The hope is actually somewhat self-destructive. It's self-destructive. The reason, one of those steps I said in the worst day cycle at the bottom there, when we're fully destroyed, but we have hope. The reason we go there is for two reasons. But if you don't know about the worst day cycle, the authentic self cycle, or emotional authenticity, almost always you'll pursue hope to re-victimize yourself. You will rekindle because you're stuck in false power and certainty of outcome. Remember, our brain seeks to repeat what it knows, not what's right and wrong. And so most people, because they haven't learned emotional authenticity, they use that hope to start the process over and stay on the exact same loop and re-victimize themselves and stay in the relationship instead of setting boundaries and all the other things they need to do. The question becomes, where did we learn this hope? Remember the first time your parents were perfectly imperfect and you went through the worst day cycle process and you felt hope? Did you see that you blamed yourself? Remember, another step in there was that we shame and blame ourselves. What's the advantage of blaming ourselves? Think of it. See if anyone can answer this. Why do we all blame ourselves? Do you see what we get when we blame ourselves? We get hope. Because do you see, this is where the false power comes from. If I'm to blame for my parents' imperfections, that means there might be something I could do. I could change and be different. And they might actually see and love and honor and empower my authenticity. That's where we learn hope. Is we turn blame. Remember, just before hope is shame and blame. We blame ourselves. Because if I'm to blame, it means I'm in control, which means I can choose to think, feel, or act differently and hopefully get a different outcome. The problem is Without emotional authenticity, we stay stuck in the left hemisphere. We double down on our false line of thinking, our false process. We stay stuck in the worst day cycle, and we do the same thing over and over again. So the only way that this is where hope is helpful, remember I said it's two things. It's destructive, but it's also there from our authentic self. What it's trying to drive us towards is do the work to heal the worst day cycle, develop emotional authenticity, learn about the authentic self cycle, or learn to live in it, so that we can reattach to our authenticity, which we had to drop in favor of attachment with our parents. So those are the two reasons we fall into hope. So what I'm hearing in this, where was it, Crystal, is you don't have the emotional authenticity, knowledge, skills, and tools to activate hope in a way that breaks the cycle and stops you from reacting from your trauma gut and gets you learning how to react from your authentic gut feeling. They're confused. Almost all of us react from what we think is our gut feeling, but all it is the worst day cycle repeating our trauma. There's a difference between the two. I lay that out in my first book, but I go even deeper on it in my second book of how you can discern the difference and what the authentic self experience is. So you know what, because it's a feeling, it's not a thought. What's a gut feeling? We have to know what that authentic gut feeling feels like. Well, we can't achieve that or create it unless we have emotional authenticity, unless we know about the authentic self cycle and we know how to live it. Okay. So that's the solution for you, Crystal. Once again, it's my books and classes, unless you can find somebody else who can teach you the process that you need. Let's see who else is in here. Sarah, please, Kenny, can you talk about the feeling of disgust? Still can't find an explanation why I always feel disgusted if suddenly a member of my family, sister, brother, mom, or dad touched me. Well, I can't, remember, I'm going off a paragraph of somebody's life history. What I can say is if somebody feels disgusted by the touch of somebody, then there's some sort of trauma around touch. I'm not saying somebody was molested. I don't know, but something happened around that. There's some sort of consequence an adult experienced as a child that was traumatic when it comes to touch, and therefore they feel disgusted. They developed, remember, emotional concepts. Disgust is an emotion. So you developed an emotional simulation, concept, and definition. The simulation is if I get touched, and you're simulating being touched. The concept is, wait a minute, the concept of being touched by anyone in my immediate family creates the definition of disgust. Well, that means there's an experience that you had as a child where you learn to create that definition of disgust. So until that deep healing work is done, and look, I still am getting memories from childhood. I've been at this for 30 years. Our brain releases experiences when we're ready to overcome them. Here's the point. Even if you don't remember any sort of consequence or situation where you were touched as a child that created this simulation, concept, and definition, as long as you can trace back to a general time when you think it might have started, when you learned that feeling, that's good enough to start there. And we can all do that. If you're meant to remember whatever the event was, you will, but you don't need to recover. You can create a new simulation, concept, and definition for being touched if you learn the emotional authenticity method. And so it's what I'm seeing in this, Sarah, is, again, it's the same construct for all of us. We just don't have it's what my counselor said to me, go become an expert. There's just not enough expertise here. There's not enough self-awareness of how your emotions are running your life. Well, the only way to get that emotional awareness is to make the choice to go become an expert and learn somebody's process and plan. I know this emotional intelligence will not give you the knowledge, skills, and tools you need. There might be another teacher out there that does. I'm not familiar with them, but that doesn't mean they don't exist. I can tell you the programs and processes I put together in my books and my classes will give you that, along with my personal coaching. Just remember, I'm seeing a lot more questions popping up, and I'm not going to stay on for 2.5 hours this time like I did the other night, because I'm doing another one of these tonight. So if you have a question and you're like, oh my God, I want it answered, you're welcome to donate, and whoever donates, I'll bump to the front of the line. You can use that super chat feature. There's a little $sign there if it's important to you. All right, let's see who's next. Jamie, do you have a feel for when your audio recording? Yes, I recorded yesterday up to half of chapter 5, where by next weekend, the thought is that I'll have it all recorded and then hopefully loaded at the latest the middle of January. So it's just a couple weeks away. We're this close to being ready. And to me, my content must be listened to. Here's why. Only 7% of all communication is words. 93% is tone and body language. If you read my words, because I teach truth and responsibility, if you're not aware of emotional authenticity, many times you might feel you're going to you will project your own emotions onto my words. But if you hear my voice reading the manuscript, it's a completely different experience. So also the way the brain processes information, I always suggest when it comes to especially my books, that both, if you truly want to integrate and have the most, gain the most from my content in my books, is do both. Listen to them and read them. Your brain will assimilate the concepts faster, will understand them more quickly. You'll make more progress by doing that, okay? Because it's two different ways of learning. When we read, we project. So it blocks us from gaining what we really need. All right. It's still a benefit because the way we process different. So we're going to get some benefits from reading, but listening, it's a completely different process. And so that's why combining the two, you get the fullest, what's the right word? It takes advantage of the way your brain works, and you'll have the most benefit if you do both. Obviously, the Audible won't be ready for 2 weeks. Get started reading, and then when the Audible drops, you can combine the two. All right. Let's see who's here next. Judith, will the actual book be sold on Amazon? Yes, Judith. Okay. My book, the ebook version, is available on Amazon for pre-sale right now. If you go purchase it right now, at midnight tonight, it'll be sent to your Kindle. The paperback and hardback will be live tonight at midnight. Right now on Barnes & Noble, all three are live. The ebook you can actually get delivered right now. So whichever one you want to use, if you want Barnes & Noble, you can pre-order now, but they don't drop until January 4th. Amazon, all three formats drop at midnight tonight. So if anybody I have the links spread everywhere, but if somebody wants the link to Amazon, let me know, post it in the chat, and I'll put it down here so that you can get over there right now, get your copy, or as soon as it turns midnight or when you wake up in the morning, you can purchase whether you want paperback or hardback. Okay. I'm reading your book right now. It's really insightful. Oh my gosh, Soul Taker, you must have gotten the ebook version on Barnes & Noble. I'm glad you're seeing that it's insightful. Yeah, when you learn about paradoxes and how to turn everything around and descriptors, and you're just going to, I've set up a process to break down that left hemisphere denial monster. And unless you're really stuck in your left hemisphere, this book, you're just going to love it. Okay. Let's see, Sarah. Okay. I went through disgust. Maggie, after 2.5 years breaking away from my long narcissistic marriage, I'm still finding it hard to be happy with just me. Okay, Maggie, what that tells me is, gosh, again, this is so hard to tell truth, but try and do it loving. That implies that a person hasn't invested in themselves to do the recovery work. They're still stuck in the victim mode, getting too much from talking about the narcissist, so they don't have to address the underlying childhood trauma and pain that created the attraction to the narcissist. They're avoiding healing the part they played. And that's what happens, whether it's when we're stuck in this spot, it's because we haven't done the work to see how our childhood set us up to pick the narcissist. Literally, I could take a person and put them in a room with 20,000 people of the opposite sex and only one narcissist. And if their childhood environment created the attraction, like radar, it'd be the only person they'd choose. They'd go, there's something special about this one. It's how our brain works. It's how the left hemisphere gets stuck as a denial monster, repeating the worst day cycle and victimizing us because we haven't learned emotional authenticity to get a complete process and ability to process all information to avoid people like that. So, Maggie, if you feel you're ready to let go of that pain and reclaim your authentic self and start living happily, it's just simple. Go become an expert, invest in yourself. That can be with me in my books and classes, or you can choose another teacher, but that's the missing link in your process. All right. Good morning, Mary R. Melissa, my hair is falling out. My siblings won't move out of the house, but controls the finances still. I'm done, but the trauma bond is real, and I still struggle with it a year later. How do I get unstuck? This is stuck in the victim side of things. This is Melissa, where we are playing the powerless victim. We're focusing on what we can't control and the story of how they're controlling us instead of remember the authentic self cycle, truth. I always have options. Now, to exercise those options, I must take responsibility. I must put a plan in place to address the current problem and focus on what I can control, which is me and my actions, instead of focusing on them and what they're doing and staying stuck in the victim left hemisphere position, denial, monster, blaming. Instead, I need to get into step 3, healing. I need to commit to investing in myself and a process and program to do the healing work so I can learn to start saying no, setting boundaries, and putting a plan in place so that I'm not in this position with somebody else. So again, it's the authentic self cycle. Get into truth. I'm not honoring me. I'm stuck in the left hemisphere, self-deception, denial-making monster, staying stuck as the victim, focusing on what I can't control. 2, that came out bad. 2, I haven't taken responsibility by putting a plan in place to focus on what I can control, which is me. And I do that by pursuing a plan of healing. I invest in myself in a process and program so that I can learn the knowledge, skills, and tools I'm lacking to exercise the process and plan. And from that place, I can forgive myself and forgive others. And that's how the situation will end. All right. Oh my gosh, this is going to be hard. Ayubian? I think it's, I don't know. Ayubian Mariwani. Great name. Hello, Kenny. Here is Ayub from Germany. Would you please tell me the name of the author of the book on how society, culture, and parenting? Oh, that's my book. Your Journey to Being Yourself. I show how society, emotions are created by 3 things. The state of our body. Are we hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? The society we grow up in, the rules, think of it. 50 years ago, if you had tattoos, nose rings, if you were gay, you were chastised by society. Now it's perfectly acceptable. So now we have new emotional simulation concepts and definitions around those new societal definitions. Okay. And 3, the most significant determiner of your emotions and your constructs is your childhood environment, who you were raised by, your parents, grandparents, whoever your primary caregiver was. They place definitions in you. You get stuck in the worst day cycle and you replay those against yourself until you learn the emotional authenticity method to do the healing work and create new simulation concepts and definitions that work for you and not against you. Great question. John, emotional. Oh, shoot. Jane, sorry, Jane. I'm ready. Thanks for your honesty, kindness, and care for everyone. I'm glad you hear this. It's so hard. My childhood trauma from being nice, when I speak truth and responsibility, I still feel tremendous guilt, like I'm being mean. And so I try really hard to say it loving. So I'm glad that it came across as loving to you. That's always my goal. Because of the way I was raised, the way my father and grandfather talked, see, this is a simulation concept and definition. There is a disparity between the words I choose to communicate a concept and what's actually in my heart. I'm still working on my authentic self and my emotional authenticity and merging them together so that the words that come out of my mouth match what's in my heart. I'm glad in this case you felt that they match, Jane. His question is, even my hobbies relate to coping with childhood trauma. I don't enjoy them now, but they allowed me a way to fit in. How do I identify my authentic interests and not those informed by the trauma? Great question. Well, the first step in identifying those is this, and this is one of the major differences between emotional intelligence and emotional authenticity. The reason a person doesn't know their authentic morals and values, needs and wants, negotiables and non-negotiables is because they're stuck in codependency. Emotional intelligence doesn't even tell you that. So you'll never gain emotional intelligence until you do codependence recovery work. So a person who is pursuing careers and hobbies that go against themselves, that's because all of us get stuck in the attachment, authenticity bind. Remember, we have to attach to our caregivers or we will die. To do that, we have to drop our authenticity because we're not taught how to parent effectively. So we then accept their morals and values, needs and wants, negotiables and non-negotiables, but mostly we don't accept anything. Here's the proof. You ask people what they want or like, and most people, I don't know. So what's your moral and value on this? I don't know. People don't know because they're stuck in their false persona, detached from their authentic self. So that's why it requires worst day cycle recovery, authentic self cycle, learning that process and emotional authenticity so that you can start discerning, wait a minute, is this my moral and value or theirs? Now, everyone thinks they know them. You don't. I promise you, you don't. First of all, you have them mixed up. Morals are just good or bad. Do I like this or not? Values is what people think are morals. So in other words, let's take relationships. Maybe somebody values having sex on the first date. Maybe somebody values waiting till marriage. So the person who values it on the first date would see it as morally good. The person who doesn't value it would see it as morally bad. Now, here's the thing about morals and values. You have to go through every aspect of your life. Let me ask you this. When you dated somebody or the person you married, did you ask them, like, what do you fight about? Finances, who's going to pay the bills, who does the child rearing? All of these things are your morals and values. Well, you never learned them. And now you're in a marriage and go, like, that was me. My first wife, we were opposite political parties. We had opposite parenting beliefs, like everything in our life. I didn't know what my morals and values were. I didn't even know until we got married and I started observing her behavior. I'm like, I don't value that. That's morally bad. We'd go for drives. She liked me to slow down so she could look in people's windows. Her value is it's okay to drive down the street and look at people's windows. She values that, sees it as morally good. I personally saw it. I don't value it at all. I see it as morally bad. I wish I'd asked that question when we were dating. This is what you get in the classes. You get a whole process to teach you how to find your morals and values, what your authentic needs and wants are. That's what is missing, Tunes. You don't know what those are. So you don't know what careers or hobbies or relationships to pursue. And so you're going against yourself. And that's why you're miserable. That's codependence recovery. So to have so-called emotional intelligence, you need emotional authenticity, because it gives you a codependence recovery plan so you can discover these things and you can live in your emotional authenticity in your authentic self. Okay, so that's the answer to that. Let's see who's next. Bob Scheibel. I'm a bit behind on the stream, but oops, I'm not going to say the F, but F word, yes. That's what I've been trying to tell myself these past few months. I am worth the same love I put out. Yes, you are. But proof, here's the thing. People think the way they talk to themselves proves that they love themselves. Talking to ourselves positively is basically worthless. It doesn't mean we love ourselves. Two things prove that we love ourselves. The first is the most important. Our actions show that we love ourselves. Actions always trump words. So if our actions aren't displaying that we love ourselves, if we're staying with narcissists, if we're in an addiction, if we're in a career, a hobby, whatever it is, however we're living our life, if we're living our life against ourselves, that's an area we don't love ourselves. And there isn't any amount of positive self-talk you can throw at that to change it. Remember, limiting beliefs or beliefs of any kind aren't about what you think. They're based on what you feel. And I'm going to prove it to you. So this is why, I get so frustrated with most personal development, because it's all about thinking positive. It's thinking positive only matters if you can feel positive. And let me prove it to you. I want you to think back to, if any of you played a sport, think back to the event. For those, maybe they're ladies who didn't play sports, but you took a test somewhere in your life, right? Remember the feeling, whether you're driving to the game or you're heading to school to take the test and you're like, oh no, this isn't good. I'm not going to play well. I'm going to fail. And what did you do? You threw all the positive, no, I believe in myself. I love myself. You talked positively nonstop. And then what happened? You stunk. You failed the test. You threw 3 interceptions. You let in 3 goals, whatever it was. No amount of positive thinking will change that outcome. Because why? What are you feeling on your way there? You're feeling fear, rejection, inadequacy, helpless, hopeless, powerless. The feeling is driving your behavior. Remember, we always feel before we think. Every thought starts with a feeling. It's neuroscience. I give you citation after citation. People still want to, in their left hemisphere. No, we think first. This book is, I just threw it over and over against the wall, trying to break down people's left hemisphere's self-deception and denial, and how they double down on their falseness and false beliefs at believing that thoughts run our lives. They don't. Our feelings create our thoughts. Until you can shift the feeling, what I call feelization, and you can only do that with emotional authenticity, not emotional intelligence. Until you learn how to do that, you'll never change this, ever. It requires, if you want to conquer a limiting belief, if you want to love yourself, it requires learning the knowledge, skills, and tools to create the emotional authenticity feeling to change the way you think and talk to yourselves. Okay? As far as chat and speaking to others, I'm going to set a boundary. Before you give advice or make comments to others, ask their permission. This is called boundaries. I talk about this in the book. It's called taking somebody's inventory. Whenever we tell somebody what they should think, feel, believe, or do, we are acting codependently. we are telling them who they should be. Well, the truth is, what we don't realize is when you learn what you learn in this book and you paradox it and you realize your description or metaphor about the other person, your judgment, your criticism, you're not talking to them. You're actually talking to yourself. So first of all, if you want to criticize somebody, recognize your criticism isn't for them. It's for yourself. There's something inside you. And the word that you choose to criticize them with is your doorway in. It can either be metaphorically or direct description of how, here's, like, I hated the way people drove. I didn't drive like them, but it was a metaphor. I suffered addictions, divorce. You've read my life story. It's a disaster. I didn't know how to drive my life. That's why I couldn't stand the way people drove. Okay? You're going to learn how to do that, and how to turn it back on yourselves and get into truth so you can take responsibility, do the underlying healing work so you stop using, because when we criticize them, it's actually, we're criticizing ourselves. It's boomeranging back. Whether you feel it or not, that's what you're doing. And so when you learn the authentic self cycle and realize, wait a minute, my criticism and judgments are beautiful. As long as I don't say them, but I pause and go, wait a minute, this is about me. This is my detachment from my authentic self. If I break this down with the process, emotional authenticity process, I can learn how to connect to me and what my true morals and values, needs and wants, negotiables and non-negotiables are. Okay? So please ask permission before taking somebody's inventory, for offering a suggestion. Allow them to say yes or no and invite in the information. If they say no, please respect their boundary. But before commenting to each other, if it has any type of advice or commentary about what they said, please ask their permission before you do it. If you don't, from this point forward, then I'll just, I'll have to figure out how to block people and take them off the chat, because I won't allow people to break boundaries. All right. Let's go on to the next one. Tunes says, thanks, Kenny. I've ordered your book and the Pia Melody books. Good. Nilafar, hello, Kenny. I'm in healing process and I've had bad headache every day after narcissists had abused me, but good to other coworkers. Nobody believes me. Even I don't argue and try less connection with him. Okay. Well, what this tells me, Nilafar, is somewhere you're working against yourself. You're not following your morals and values, needs and wants, negotiables and non-negotiables. There's also a lack of codependence recovery, because your internal boundary, meaning their thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and actions, are getting inside and making your head hurt. You're doing that to yourself. No one ever has the power to make us think, feel, believe, or do anything. And so if we're being affected by their actions, it means we need codependence recovery work. We need to learn how to put a protective mechanism over us. My last live stream that I did the other day, I shared how to create that, that boundary from people's thoughts, feelings, and actions. But it goes much deeper. We need to do internal codependence recovery work and gain emotional authenticity. So again, my books and classes will give you that process if you're tired of having headaches and being affected by others. Tizer Yosef, thank you for your time. You're very welcome, Tizer. Thank you for your time. Kim Lacey, hi, Kenny. How do you find the rage? I've been taught to forgive and forget. I never hold on to any scenario from my childhood, but definitely don't want to hold rage inside of its hidden help. Well, look at your descriptors and metaphors. You haven't forgiven or forgotten. You got taught to suppress your rage. So for me, if I were in that position, what I would do is I would look through I'd try and remember all the times I was told to forgive and forget and not express my authentic feelings. I'd make a list, and then you'll see it right away. You'll remember I felt A, B, C, or D, and they're usually some form of anger or rage. Look, healthy anger is good. It's stop. Don't treat me that way. And you didn't get to express that. And so you're just stuck repeating. You're stuck in the worst day cycle. You got caught up in the attachment authenticity bind. You're trying to be the good kid, even as an adult, and you're detached from your authentic self. Well, the only way to do that is codependence recovery. and emotional authenticity recovery to learn, to gain the process to go, wait a minute, I learned this back here. I'm just repeating it. This mantra, your mantra is, where was it? Kim's was forgive and forget. That's the mantra. So when I discovered my mantras, if mine was forgive and forget, I'd recognize every time that came up, the answer's in the opposite. Oh, no, 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 no. I need to deal with this. I can't forget, because if I try to forget, I won't be able to forgive me or them. And so that's how I paradoxed it and turned it back on myself. And by listening to the descriptors and metaphors, and if you want to learn more how to do that, my next book teaches you along with my classes. Okay. Hello, my ex has alienated me, my son from me, and my son sees me as the bad mother. There's only one solution, Hello. I've been through this. Go become an expert in parenting with a narcissistic ex, with parenting someone who has alienated us. Go to do our own emotional authenticity recovery and codependence recovery, because the only reason we ended up with this narcissistic ex who's done that is because we have unhealed childhood trauma. So the greatest thing we can do, the only thing we can control, remember, is ourselves. So the more we talk about what a jerk they are and what they're doing, the more damage we're doing to our son or daughter, even if we're not seeing them. Because it is our responsibility. Remember, truth, responsibility, healing, and forgiveness. We have to get into truth. I was equally toxic because I chose this person. Therefore, I need to take responsibility. And I'm not to blame, and I am responsible for doing the healing work that created my attraction to them and played a part in this dynamic being set up. The way I do that is I go become an expert and do the healing work on codependency, developing emotional authenticity, and healing myself so that I can forgive them and forgive myself. And that way, the day I see my child, they will see a completely different person than what they've been told about. That's my only chance to save this, is to focus on what I can control, me. Okay. All right. Let's see. Elo says, Sarah, thank you, Kenny. You're very welcome. Elo, my ex uses the Bible against me. Okay, it's the same thing. You're still telling me the story about him, and the solution is still the same. Turn it back on yourself. Get into truth, the authentic self cycle, truth, responsibility, healing, and forgiveness. So whatever tactics he's using, the reason they're affecting you is a lack of codependence recovery and a lack of emotional authenticity. So if you want to overcome this, you get to decide if you want to develop the knowledge, skills, and tools to be able to address that. If you choose not to, this will continue. Okay? All right. Tizer, how to deal with family members who are trying to put down other family members. That's codependence recovery. Stay out of it. It's none of my business. If somebody wants to treat somebody ugly, they get to do it. I don't have to participate. I know that I don't like being around it, so I just leave the room. But look, everyone gets to act as nicely or toxically as they want. This is called the 3 gets of Al-Anon. Get off their back, get out of their way, get on with their own life. When we are observing other people and judging their behaviors, we're on their back. We're going, oh, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? All right, that's us taking their inventory. We're hyper vigilant on what they're doing, right or wrong. It's none of our business. We have to get out of their way. They get to live life however they want, and so do I. And how do I get off their back and get out of their way? I get on with my own life. I go become an expert in living in truth, responsibility, healing, and forgiveness, developing codependence recovery and emotional authenticity. So I'm not affected by this. So every time I see that, it's a trigger. Oh, go focus on what I can control. Me, truth, responsibility, healing, and forgiveness. The authentic self cycle. Kenny, what age were your children when you had to detach? Well, the alienation started at immediately the day of the separation, when the kids were 4 and 7. Actually, it started during the marriage. But it's been, 3 years now since I've heard anything from one daughter. Yeah, it's been a long time since I've heard from either of them. So, but I'm focusing on what I can control. I'm working on every day becoming more of an expert in living in truth, responsibility, healing, and forgiveness, learning about parenting, learning about emotional authenticity, learning about the authentic self cycle, doing the work to recover from my worst day cycle, so that if I ever get blessed enough to see them again, when they see me, they go, huh, this isn't the image of what I was sold. This is different. That's my responsibility. And that's the only thing I can control. So that's how I handle it. Tunes, one of my mantras is, it is what it is. But the paradox would be, it isn't what it is. But if it isn't what it is, then what is it? Well, you just said it. Do you understand the emotion behind it is what it is? Resignation. It is, I'm powerless, I'm helpless, I'm hopeless, there's nothing I can do, I'm a victim. Oh, I'm completely out of control. The paradox, it isn't what it is, oh, wait a minute. It isn't that I'm powerless. It isn't that I'm weak. It isn't that I'm a victim. It isn't that I'm stuck here. I have a choice. It's the exact opposite. I can be and do whatever I want. I just have to do the worst day cycle recovery, develop emotional authenticity, and learn to live in the authentic self cycle. That's how we get out of it. Great job, Tunes. Well done. Let's see. JSK. Hello, Kenny. I had a rough childhood where they always dragged me down. Ooh. I let people walk over me for too long because I thought my feelings were not authentic. I still doubt myself all the time. I think that's most people, JSK. And again, the solution is, it keeps coming back to the same thing. It's what my counselor said to me, go become an expert. We have to make the choice to invest in us and do the recovery work. Watching videos isn't enough. Flipping through memes and 15-second TikTok videos and YouTube shorts, you will not get recovery. It takes an active choice to pursue a program of recovery. As I always say, because I always feel like I'm creating a sales pitch, it doesn't have to be mine. But the only way you're going to change this is you're going to have to invest in yourself and pick a teacher you know, like, and trust, and read their books, take their classes. If they offer, coaching like I do, hire them to guide you down that path. All right. That's the only way out of this. We have to do the work. All right. Let's see here. Tunes. Thanks, Kenny. I appreciate you taking the time. You're very welcome. Real Deal Prime. Thanks for the hug and the heart. Rand, hey, Kenny, take it from a daughter who loves her dad most of all people in the world. Your daughter loves you too. I know they do. Even if they're loving me the best they can with where they are right now, and I accept them. I'm not taking their inventory. They get to live their life the way they want. And right now, this is how they believe it's the best for them. Who am I to judge if they're doing it wrong? It's none of my business. What's my job as a parent? To support their emotional authenticity, not use them so mine feels better. We don't have kids as an ornament that we hang on a tree that we look at to make our Christmas tree, meaning us, look better. Unfortunately, that's why most people have kids. We have kids so that we can learn how to allow them to grow and become what they want to become, not what we want. And so right now they're doing what they want to become. Well, I'm in full support of it. It sucks for me, but their job isn't to make me feel better. That's not what a kid is supposed to do. It's my job to make myself feel better. And so I have to work through that process instead of expecting my kids to fill that hole in me. They're not rejecting me. No one ever rejects us. That's another thing. People think we get rejected. No, we don't. Let me ask you, everyone, do this. What do you like on your pizza? Type an answer. Tell me what you like on your pizza. What's your favorite topping? Pepperoni, black olive, green pepper, sausage, fish. All right, Real Deal Prime likes fish. What else? Anchovies. What else we got here? Extra cheese, pepperoni and extra cheese, tomato, mushrooms. Great. Okay, now let me ask you, Rand, since Toons likes pepperoni and extra cheese, is that a rejection of you? No, has nothing to do with you. He just likes pepperoni and cheese. It's the same thing with my daughters. Right now, they like pepperoni and cheese, and I'm tomato. That's nothing to do with me. They're pursuing pepperoni and cheese, and they get to have that on their pizza. It's the same thing with dating. No one ever rejects us. They just like someone who's thinner, or they like someone who's taller, or they like someone who talks more or talks less. It's not about me. See, that's why we're all codependent. We think it's about us. That's a child state. A child, there is a healthy form of development of the child. There's a narcissistic stage where every child, the whole world revolves around them. They need that. We all need that because that's how we learn to create our authenticity. The problem is parents squash that, and we all get stuck in that self-centered narcissistic stage. And so we think somebody's rejecting us. That's proof that we're detached from the authentic self, because our authentic self recognizes at all times, I have inherent value and worth. And so if I'm feeling like you're rejecting me, it means I've detached from my authenticity. I have now made you my God. I have no value and worth unless you decide I'm the pepperoni and cheese that you like. That is severe codependence and detachment from the authentic self. So just a couple more. Oh, the pineapple paradox. All right, John, you and me, I got to have pineapple. I don't care what else I put on it. Pineapple's got to be on my pizza. So yeah, I'm a sugar addict. So I'm right there with you, John. So does that mean I don't like Real Deal Prime or Rand or anyone else? No, it just means I like pineapple. I like some of this other stuff too. Not anchovy. Sorry, I can't do that one. Or fish. Tomato, mushrooms, stuffed crust, maybe. Black olives, definitely. Yeah, love that. All right. I do like the word emotional authenticity. I'm going to tell you a little story about this. It's so funny how the authentic self cycle works. And when you really become an expert in the worst day cycle, every tragedy becomes your triumph. So I went, as you know, I've been calling everything emotional mastery for several years. So with this book, I've developed so many new concepts. I went to trademark a bunch of them. Well, one of them I went to trademark was emotional mastery. I found out it's already trademarked. And I'm like, oh no, I don't want to infringe on somebody's stuff. So I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do now? My book, the original cover said, like, the whole book had all of my stuff online is mastery. And I just had days before, like, I had to figure it out, and I couldn't figure it out. And I did what I always did. I tell you how to live out of the authentic self, what it looks and feels like. And for me, it always happens when I close my eyes and either lay by the pool. That's why I'm tan all the time. It's how I reattach to my authentic self and get authentic self insights from my authentic self gut feeling, not my trauma gut. And I was just about asleep, which is right where you access that spot. And poof, I heard myself say emotional authenticity. And it just hit me. Oh my God, that's so much more authentic to what I teach. Mastery is detached. I'm teaching truth, responsibility, healing, and forgiveness. I'm teaching authenticity. I'm writing a book about the authentic self, how to reattach to it, the true self. And so thank God somebody else picked mastery. And so if you've noticed in the last, week or 10 days, my whole websites, everything, been rushing around, converting everything to the truth. I teach emotional authenticity. So when you learn the emotional authenticity process, You will love when your life has a problem because it always leads you to your authentic self. My authentic self isn't emotional mastery. That was the best I could do based on the level of recovery I had at the time. Because I keep working this process, I gain deeper insight and more clarity. And that's where I found that I should be titling everything emotional authenticity. That's the value of learning all of this stuff. It's just amazing how it works.